Emma had always believed that some silences were louder than words. When she was 8 years old, her father disappeared without saying goodbye. Her mother, Clara, never spoke about him again. Whenever Emma asked where he had gone, Clara would smile with tired eyes and whisper, "Some answers only hurt." As the years passed, Emma stopped asking. Life was never easy. Clara worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and caring for elderly people at night. Her hands became rough, her back bent, and dark circles settled beneath her eyes, yet she never complained. Every birthday, there was a homemade cake. Every Christmas, there was a carefully wrapped gift. Emma never understood how her mother managed to provide everything when they barely had enough money to pay rent. "You always make miracles," Emma once said. Clara kissed her forehead. "No, sweetheart. Love does." Emma grew into a bright young woman, earned a university scholarship, and became an architect. She moved to another city, promising to visit every month. But life became busy. Phone calls turned into text messages. Monthly visits became holiday visits. Clara always said she understood. "I know you're building your future." Emma believed her mother was proud. She never realized how lonely the old house had become. One rainy November evening, Emma received a call from the hospital. Her mother's voice had grown weaker for months, but she had hidden the truth. Cancer. Advanced. There was little time left. Emma rushed home with tears blurring the highway. When she entered the hospital room, Clara looked impossibly small beneath the white blanket. Yet she smiled. "You came." "I'm so sorry," Emma whispered, collapsing beside her bed. "You have nothing to apologize for. I should have visited more. You were living your life." "That's exactly what I wanted." Emma held her mother's fragile hand for hours. They laughed about old memories. They cried over forgotten moments. Before sunrise, Clara reached into the bedside drawer and handed Emma a tiny wooden box. "Open this only after I'm gone." Emma shook her head violently. "Don't talk like that. You promised me once you'd always listen." "I don't want the box." "You'll need it." Those were the last complete sentences Clara ever spoke. 3 days later, Emma buried the only person who had ever loved her without conditions. The house felt unbearably quiet. Every room carried the scent of lavender and fresh bread, as though her mother had simply stepped outside. Late that night, Emma remembered the wooden box. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it. Inside were dozens of letters. Each one had a date, one for every birthday she had ever celebrated. There was also a faded photograph of a young man holding a newborn baby. Written on the back were 4 simple words. "I never stopped looking." Emma stared at the picture. It was her father. Confused, she opened the first letter. "My beautiful Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer beside you. There is something I hid because I believed it would protect your heart. Your father never abandoned you willingly." Emma's heartbeat quickened. She continued reading. "When you were little, your father discovered he had a rare illness. Doctors believed he had little time to live. He thought watching him slowly disappear would destroy us. He left because he believed we deserved a chance to remember him healthy." Tears rolled down Emma's face. The next letter explained even more. Her father had secretly sent money whenever he could. He had written hundreds of letters. He had searched for them after recovering unexpectedly. But Clara had moved several times, trying to escape painful memories. Neither of them ever found each other again. Emma felt as though her entire childhood had shifted beneath her feet. Her mother had carried this truth alone for decades. Not because she hated him, because she wanted Emma to remember love instead of suffering. At the bottom of the box was one final envelope. It contained an address. No explanation, just an address. The next morning, Emma drove 6 hours into the countryside. Her hands shook as she stood before a small white cottage, surrounded by wildflowers. She almost turned back. Instead, she knocked. Footsteps approached. An elderly man opened the door. His silver hair framed tired blue eyes. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he whispered, "Emma?" She froze. "How do you know my name?" The old man's eyes filled with tears. "I've imagined this moment every day for 30 years. He reached into his pocket and unfolded a tiny photograph. It was exactly the same picture that had been inside Clara's box. "I carried this everywhere." Emma couldn't breathe. "Are you my father?" He nodded silently. She wanted to scream. She wanted to embrace him. She wanted to ask why. Instead, she simply cried. He cried with her. They stood in the doorway like strangers, connected by invisible threads that had refused to break. Inside the cottage were hundreds of paintings. Every single one portrayed the same little girl at different ages. A child blowing birthday candles. A teenager wearing a graduation gown. A young woman standing beside imagined buildings. Emma looked around in disbelief. But I was never here. He smiled sadly. I painted the daughter I hoped you became. Every birthday he had imagined another year of her life. Every Christmas he had painted another memory he wished they could have shared. Emma collapsed into a chair. So you never forgot me? I couldn't. Then why didn't you come? I did. He opened a drawer filled with returned letters. Every envelope had the same stamp. Address unknown. Moved away. No forwarding address. I searched until I ran out of money. He looked toward the window. Then I searched with hope. Emma covered her face. All those years she had believed herself abandoned. All those years two people had been loving each other from opposite sides of silence. They spent weeks together. He told stories about meeting Clara, about dancing in the rain, about building the crib with his own hands, about singing to Emma every night before she was born. Emma shared stories about Clara's strength, her impossible optimism, her laughter. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they simply sat quietly. Healing, Emma discovered, didn't always arrive with words. One afternoon, her father handed her another envelope. I wrote this when you turned 18. She opened it. If life ever gives you the chance to read this, remember something. Never measure love by presence alone. Sometimes the deepest love exists in impossible distances. Emma cried harder than she ever had. Months later, Emma decided to restore her mother's old house instead of selling it. She transformed it into a community, home where struggling single parents could stay while rebuilding their lives. Above the entrance, she placed a small wooden sign. Love lives here. No names, no explanations, just those words. On opening day, dozens of families arrived. Children filled the garden with laughter. For the first time since losing her mother, the house felt alive again. Emma looked toward the evening sky. She imagined Clara smiling. She imagined her father standing beside her. She realized something extraordinary. The greatest inheritance her parents had left behind wasn't money, property, or possessions. It was compassion. It was resilience. It was the courage to love even when life demanded painful sacrifices. Years later, after both of her parents had become beautiful memories, Emma found herself reading Clara's letters to the children staying in the house. One little girl asked, "Do happy endings really exist?" Emma smiled gently. "They do." The little girl tilted her head. "Then why do people cry?" Emma looked at the sunset glowing through the old windows. "Because sometimes tears are not the opposite of happiness. Sometimes they're proof that love was real." The little girl hugged her tightly. Emma closed her eyes. For the first time since childhood, she no longer felt abandoned. She felt surrounded by every sacrifice her mother had made, by every letter her father had written, by every invisible thread that love had quietly woven through a lifetime of silence. And she finally understood what her mother had meant all those years ago. Love had always been the miracle.